Gunfire tore through the stillness, a storm of sound and smoke that split the desert open. 5 bullets found their mark, hammering into flesh, dust rising like a prayer that wouldn't reach heaven. The cowboy staggered but didn't fall, his shadow etched against the dying sun as 2 terrified Apache women clung to each other behind him. Then silence, thick, absolute. Only the wind moved, carrying the echo of what had just begun. Hours earlier, that same wind had been gentle. The desert stretched quiet and endless, as if time itself had forgotten this place. He'd ridden alone, 35, and carrying the kind of weariness no sleep could fix. His coat was torn, his revolver worn smooth by use, but his eyes, gray and steady, still searched for something he couldn't name. He had once chased gold, then men, then ghosts. Now he chased peace, though it kept slipping through his calloused hands. When he reached the valley of the Apache, he thought it might be his last stop. The chief's people eyed him with the caution of those who have seen too much betrayal. But respect in this land wasn't given, it was earned. He proved his worth quietly, mending fences, lifting wounded horses from dry wells, never asking for thanks. The chief, a man carved from stone and silence, watched him closely and finally nodded once, the kind of nod that meant a stranger had become tolerated, if not trusted. That was when he met the chief's daughters. Ayana was the first, 28, solemn as twilight. Her calm could silence arguments before words were spoken. Her sister Tala was her opposite, a spirit of sunlight and laughter, fierce when she defended those she loved. Together they balanced each other, 2 halves of a single heartbeat. The cowboy didn't speak much to them, but the way he moved, careful, deliberate, said enough. He looked at them not as wonders to be possessed, but as proof that kindness could still exist in a cruel world. Slowly, in the hush between campfires and sunrise, a fragile thread began to form, an understanding too quiet to be named. But peace is a fragile guest in the wild. One night, the air changed. Smoke rose from the north ridge. The chief's scouts rode and bloodied, one barely breathing. A band of bounty hunters, white men hardened by greed, were cutting through Apache lands. They carried old grudges, and their price was revenge. The camp erupted in alarm. Mothers gathered children. Warriors loaded rifles with shaking hands. The chief's voice rumbled low as thunder, commanding calm. But even calm could not hide fear. The cowboy listened from the shadows, the brim of his hat hiding his eyes. He'd known men like those hunters. He'd ridden with some once. He could still remember their laughter when they burned villages for the sake of rumor. The memory tightened something deep in his chest. When the chief ordered his daughters to flee to the mountains, they refused. Ayana said she would not run from her own land. Tala said she would not leave her father. The cowboy stepped forward then, his boots crunching over gravel, voice steady but quiet. "Let them stay," he told the chief. "Let me be the one who rides to meet what's coming." The old man looked at him a long time, and what passed between them wasn't approval or command. It was understanding. 2 men, both too tired for another war, both knowing it would come anyway. As dawn bled into the horizon, the cowboy stood alone at the canyon's mouth, revolver resting at his hip, the sisters watching from behind a rock outcropping. The wind tugged at his coat. Dust rose in little spirals at his boots. He felt no fear, only a strange calm, the kind a man feels when his life has already been spent elsewhere. Then came the riders, 3, then 5, then more, cresting the ridge like a dark tide. Their laughter carried across the open plain. He called out once, asking them to turn back. They answered with gunfire. The first bullet tore through his shoulder. The second struck his side. He stayed standing. The third hit near his ribs, driving him to one knee. Behind him, the sisters gasped, but he lifted his arm, motioning for them to stay back. The fourth and fifth hit almost together, slamming him against the rocks. Still he fired back. Each shot precise, measured. When the smoke cleared, 3 men lay dead, the rest galloping away, their courage scattered to the wind. The cowboy swayed, but didn't collapse. The chief's daughters ran to him, their hands trembling as they pressed against his wounds. He looked at them, eyes distant yet peaceful, and whispered something they could barely hear over the wind. No more running. Then his knees gave way. He fell forward into the red dust, the sky above him vast and empty, and the sisters' cries broke through the desert silence. Far off, the echo of hooves retreated, but something deeper had just begun. He woke to the sound of weeping, the kind that doesn't beg for comfort, only release. His breath rattled like wind through dry grass. Pain pulsed from 5 wounds that refused to close. For a moment he thought he was already dead, caught between the world of the living and the place where old debts are finally paid. Then a voice, soft, low, trembling, pulled him back. Ayana. Her hands were pressed against his chest, her tears falling onto the torn fabric. Tala knelt beside her, whispering prayers to the dawn. The scent of blood and sage filled the air. The cowboy's lips parted, but no words came, only a hoarse breath shaped like regret. They'd carried him from the canyon to the chief's lodge, wrapped in blankets woven with symbols of protection. The tribe moved around him like a slow heartbeat, grinding herbs, boiling water, whispering to the spirits. He drifted in and out of fever dreams, seeing faces he'd buried years ago. Every time he stirred, Ayana was there, eyes red but steady, refusing to let death claim him easily. Tala's laughter was gone now, replaced by a watchful silence. The sisters had learned what war takes, and they would not let it take him too. When the fever finally broke, he opened his eyes to find Ayana watching the horizon through the lodge opening. Dawn light traced her hair, and for the first time since the bullets, he felt warmth that wasn't from the fire. He tried to speak, but his throat cracked. She turned, saw his struggle, and pressed a hand to his shoulder. "Rest," she whispered, though her voice wavered. "The land still holds you." Days passed, measured by the rhythm of his recovery. He learned that the bounty hunters who had fled were regrouping, 24 now, seeking revenge for the men he'd killed. The chief's people whispered of leaving the valley, but the chief himself stood firm. "We do not run," he said, though his gaze lingered on his daughters longer than before. The cowboy listened quietly from his mat, the firelight flickering against his pale face. He had come to this place seeking peace, yet peace always seemed to demand blood before it would stay. At night, when pain kept him awake, he'd hear Ayana outside the tent singing to calm the spirits. Her voice was soft and unadorned, the sound of earth remembering rain. Once she entered and sat beside him, her hands folded in her lap. "You could have left," she said. "No one would have blamed you." He managed a faint smile. "Maybe I already left too many people behind." Something in her eyes shifted, pity giving way to something deeper, quieter. She reached out, brushed a strand of hair from his brow, and said, "Then maybe you finally come home." For a few fleeting days, it seemed she might be right. The camp softened again, laughter returning, children chasing each other through the dust, Tala's voice brightening with stories. The cowboy could almost believe he belonged. But peace, as always, was only the pause before another storm. The riders came at dusk, silent this time. No warning, just the sudden crack of rifles from the ridge. The chief's men scattered, returning fire from the cover of rocks. Screams split the valley. Horses reared. Smoke climbed into the bleeding sky. The cowboy forced himself upright, ignoring the tearing pain in his ribs. Ayana tried to stop him, but he caught her hand. "If I stay down, they'll come through me anyway." She saw the truth in his eyes. There was no reasoning with a man who'd already accepted his fate. He stepped outside, gun belt slung low, every movement slow but certain. The chief called out, telling him to fall back, but the cowboy kept walking toward the ridge. The bounty hunters were shadows in the smoke, their voices cold and mocking. He fired once, twice, each shot cutting the air clean, each one finding its mark. Then came the return. Bullets screamed through the dusk, slicing past him. One grazed his cheek, another shattered the ground at his feet. Still, he walked forward. The last of the gang dismounted, charging in blind fury. The cowboy waited, the revolver heavy in his trembling hand. When the dust settled, 5 men lay still. The valley was quiet again, except for the low moan of the wind. Ayana and Tala ran toward him, their cries breaking the silence. He stood for a heartbeat longer, the gun slipping from his grip, eyes distant. Then he fell to his knees. Ayanna caught him before he hit the ground. His breath came shallow, his pulse fading. She whispered that he was safe now, that it was over. But he only looked at her, a faint smile ghosting his lips. "Not over," he murmured. "Just finally right." His eyes closed, and she felt the weight of peace settle into her arms, terrible and tender all at once. And somewhere beyond the ridge, the wind began to sing, carrying his story farther than bullets ever could.